The morning fog rolled thick over San Francisco Bay, swallowing the jagged outline of Alcatraz Island. To anyone on the mainland, it looked less like a prison and more like a shipwreck stranded on rock, a concrete fortress surrounded by icy waters and currents that killed hope. Inside, the air smelled of salt, bleach, and rust. The guards called it the Rock. The inmates called it Hell with a View. It was 1962, and 1,576 prisoners had passed through Alcatraz's steel gates since it opened. None had ever escaped, not truly. Some tried. Some died. Most just stopped dreaming. But Frank Morris, prisoner AZ-1441, wasn't like most. He was quiet, calculating, the kind of man who studied silence the way others studied locks. With an IQ higher than most of his keepers, Frank had spent years bouncing between prisons for bank robbery and escape attempts. Alcatraz was supposed to be the end of his road. Instead, it became the beginning of his legend. 2 cells down from Frank lived John and Clarence Anglin, brothers from Florida with matching smirks and a habit of whispering late into the night. They'd grown up swimming in the cold rivers of Michigan, their childhood marked by mischief and petty theft. By the time they landed on the Rock, they'd already escaped from a Georgia prison once before. When Morris first spoke to them during a work detail, something clicked, not friendship, but shared ambition. At night, the noise of clanging bars hid their whispers. "Morris, you ever think of swimming?" "Clarence, in this water? You'd freeze before sunrise." Morris smiled faintly. "Not if you plan it right." They began to dream aloud, not foolishly, but mechanically, like engineers of their own freedom. They studied the guards' rotations, the ventilation shafts, the schedules. Every detail was a piece of a puzzle only 3 men could see forming. Beneath every prison steel lies a secret, and in Alcatraz, it was the utility corridor behind the cells. Years of moisture had corroded the concrete around the air vents. Frank noticed the weakness first, a small crack hidden behind the grill near his sink. He began chipping it away with a spoon, stolen from the mess hall. Each night, the scrape of metal blended with the rhythm of the prison's hum. He hid the dust in his pockets, sprinkling it onto the yard during morning cleanup. The brothers joined in. They crafted tools from scavenged materials, a drill from a vacuum motor, handles from broken spoons, glue from stolen soap. They worked every night for months, hiding their progress with cardboard and paint. And as the holes widened, so did their resolve. Freedom was not a dream, it was a construction project. Escape was impossible if the guards noticed empty beds during head counts. So Frank built faces. Using a mixture of soap, toilet paper, and cement dust, he molded dummy heads that resembled the men themselves. Real human hair, gathered from the prison barbershop floor, added uncanny realism. Each head was painted with the dull lifelessness of a sleeping man. Under the dim cell lights, they looked disturbingly real. The night before the escape, Morris tested his creation. He placed it on his pillow and watched the guard stroll past during the 2 a.m. check. No hesitation. No alarm. Just the shuffle of boots echoing down the hall. It worked. The fog was thicker than ever, the tide merciless. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers waited until the lights dimmed to the prison's usual half-darkness. At precisely 9:30 p.m., they slipped through the vent holes, crawling into the narrow corridor behind their cells. The air was thick with dust and the sound of dripping pipes. One by one, they climbed 3 stories upward through the ventilation shaft, emerging onto the roof through a hole they had cut earlier. Above them, the roar of wind. Below, 40 feet of death if they slipped. They moved like shadows across the rooftop, hearts pounding in rhythm with the bay's distant waves. At the far side, they shimmied down drain pipes to the ground near the shower block, where they'd hidden something miraculous, a handmade raft and life vests, stitched together from more than 50 stolen raincoats. The last sound heard before they vanished was the hiss of air-inflating rubber, and then silence. At dawn, the guards began the usual routine. Breakfast trays clattered. Doors clanged open. Then came the call from cell block B. Inmate not responding. A guard tapped the sleeping Frank Morris on the head, and the dummy rolled off, smashing on the floor. Clay. Soap. Hair. Panic spread. The same discovery in the Anglin cells. Within minutes, alarms screamed across the island. Helicopters circled. Patrol boats combed the bay. All they found were fragments, a paddle floating near Angel Island, a life vest washed up on the shore, a waterproof wallet belonging to one of the Anglins. No bodies. No raft. The FBI's conclusion: they drowned. But even J. Edgar Hoover's men couldn't prove it. For years, the FBI hunted rumors, a postcard from South America, a sighting in Brazil, whispers from relatives who claimed to receive Christmas cards signed John and Clarence. One photo surfaced in 2013, allegedly showing the Anglin brothers in Rio in the 1970s, older, tanned, alive. Experts were divided. The Bureau officially closed the case in 1979, declaring the men presumed dead. But the U.S. Marshals Service still keeps it open today, the oldest active fugitive case in America. Inside the old prison, now a tourist site, guides still tell the story with a shiver in their voice. Visitors stare into the empty cells and the tiny vent holes behind the sinks, smaller than a man's shoulders, and wonder how determination could carve freedom from stone. 60 years later, the mystery lives. Some say the men drowned within sight of the glowing city lights. Others believe they melted into anonymity, perhaps living quiet lives in South America, their secret never told. Every so often, an anonymous letter surfaces, claiming to be from one of them, confessing survival and illness, asking for leniency. None have been verified, but each reignites the legend. What remains undeniable is the human brilliance and desperation that fueled the plan. No blueprints, no help from outside, only imagination, courage, and months of quiet work beneath the noses of armed guards. They turned spoons into chisels, scraps into boats, fear into freedom. On stormy nights, when fog blankets the bay and the prison lights flicker across the water, locals swear they hear faint or strokes and whispers carried on the wind. We made it. Whether that's ghost or memory, no one knows. But on that June night in 1962, the Rock lost its captives.